So when you see Black Jesus, you can attribute that back to Welcome to Black Philosophy, Intro to Black Philosophy. This next philosopher I want to talk about, heavy hitter.
All right! Yo, yo, woo, woo.
Everybody's been heavy hitter so far, I'm just gonna be honest, but when I talk about the impact, you'll see why I'm just starting with that.
And away we go.
This next philosopher is someone who is behind the Black nationalist movement and Black is beautiful and some really other cool things. And through that investigation of Blackness is how that philosophical component comes into play in their work, in their life, and why I would acknowledge this person as a philosopher.
Ooh, this is so exciting.
So this next person is Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey. So like I said, Marcus Garvey was behind Black nationalism. He is I won't say because really there's just a long line of traditions in Black thought that just connect and touch one another. Like Marcus Garvey really has an influence from Booker T. Washington, and he like took Booker T. Washington and just went somewhere else with it. Booker T. Washington is also who I would call another Black philosopher. So I won't say but he's an important figure behind the Black nationalist movement. Some people might understand him to be like the Godfather of Black nationalism.
Ooh.
Black nationalism is this idea that Black people should get together and have their own nation by themselves with their own power structures and live amongst one another and just do their own thing separate from white people, right? So it's like a separatist philosophy. And the idea behind that was that Black people just need to stand on their own and be away from the toxicity that's at play and harming them actively.
That sounds good.
This philosophy actually of how to be and how to live and how to exist, this theory of what would work for the success and the happiness of Black people, that Black nationalist theory is actually something that directly influenced the Nation of Islam, and then ultimately figures like Malcolm X, also a philosopher, and Muhammad Ali, also a philosopher. I'm blaming everybody. But right, when they talk about these things of Black people should really just live on their own and have their own economic system, political structure, and nation, that's rooted in some things that Marcus Garvey had to say. And also these things eventually have an influence on things like the Black Panther Party. And I would even say some things that come from the more pacifist side of the activist movement with like MLK and things of that nature. Because what Marcus Garvey did was that he instilled positive images of Black people in the world and in the community. So Marcus Garvey really believed that Black people could be well off financially, socially, politically, and could be successful if we just gathered together and had our own nation. He suggested we should go back to Africa and have our own country and have our own national system and build our own livelihoods up instead of living under the thumb of whiteness in these other countries. So we should all globally come from the world together in continental Africa and be successful under our own power and political systems.
Freedom.
He thought it was really important to elevate and idolize like different Black figures that have been important to our histories. Part of what I'm doing here. He formed the Universal Negro Improvement Association. It had a Back to Africa message, but it was like back to Africa on our own terms, right? Let's go back to our roots because we've been spread all over the earth by means of global slavery and diaspora, which slavery and capitalism at play.
You ain't never lied about that.
But this Back to Africa message was like, let's take our own power back and move back on our own terms and form our own system in which we can all be supportive to one another, be successful, and be powerful and well off. Garvey was also a capitalist. He thought that capitalism was a really effective way in order to be successful and have a good life and live the good life. And so in terms of our philosophical connections, right, this investigation of the good life and what would be good for Black people politically and socially and economically, that's all in that framework of ethics. Also a little bit of metaphysics, a little bit of epistemology. Honestly, when you go and get into these applied philosophy fields, so like social philosophy, political philosophy, environmental philosophy, philosophy of race. These are applied fields of philosophy. I would say that those applied fields are really just terms to talk about the specific topic that we're doing philosophical questioning with, that we're doing philosophical investigation with, and that we're really blending all four of those main categories of philosophy together to investigate a topic or a theme. And actually, from this point forward in my videos, what I'm just gonna do, when somebody is more so in an applied philosophical space, I'm going to acknowledge that applied philosophical space so you can get more familiar with some of these other areas of philosophy, and just understand that when I talk about those things, it's because they're really just blending all the main four branches into their work.
You can say that again.
It's just certain things might be higher or lower in terms of prioritization in the conversation based on what we're talking about. So yeah, like Garvey, he's really touching on all four of those branches, but the theme that we're applying philosophy to is in political philosophy and philosophy of race and social philosophy. Right, so we're doing a lot here.
I can do it all.
Yeah, so again, big idea is take power back into our own hands, establish our own nation, build our own economic system up, and there's this idea of unity. There's an idea of pride in African cultural heritage, and there's an idea of complete autonomy, not having to rely on anyone else's systems or handouts or structures, but creating our own thing and being able to live with amongst ourselves and on our own. But globally, take all the Black people globally and do that for ourselves. That's like a main component of Garvey's work throughout his life. And again, inspired by Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington is often acknowledged as like pull yourself up by the bootstraps philosopher, in saying that it's up to us to do things on our own. Now I'll say, like, these ideas can be contentious when you investigate further into like Black history of thought on how to make social progress, and in terms of today's thought, like there's a question that's begged of like, how can you do that when you're constantly being attacked? And like, we have been trying to do these things, but we've been attacked. So think about the race riots, all in various aspects of this country. There was a Black Wall Street that was burned to the ground because there was a white public that was upset about what was going on there. There's been many attempts at being successful in the financial economic space over history that just have been targeted and attacked. Think about the undermining of governments that happens from imperialist nations.
This is bullcrap.
When these nations start to get built up, they're undermined actively through efforts of these other governmental agencies going in covertly, like undermining those systems.
Hell no.
So how are you supposed to do that when those things exist? Yes, those things are at play, but at the same time, we're still engaging in a really interesting conversation of like what could be. And Garvey, I think it's important to still acknowledge and respect, because again, that positive Black imagery. So my Black American folks watching this video, would you see representations of Black Jesus? You can likely attribute that back to Garvey. I'm reading an article that I'm actually just gonna share the link to here on Garvey's life. Garvey's Black nationalism blended with his Christian outlook rather dramatically when he claimed that African Americans should view God through their own spectacles. If whites could view God as white, then Blacks could view God as Black. In 1924, he canonized Jesus Christ as a Black man of sorrows and the Virgin Mary as a Black Madonna. Garvey used that image as an inspiration to succeed in this life. African Americans need to worship a God that understood their plight, understood their suffering, and would help them overcome their present state. Garvey was not interested in promoting hope in the afterlife. Success in this life was the key. Achieving economic, cultural, social, and political success would free African Americans in this life. There's a reclaiming of Jesus and Mary and God from a Black lens, and understanding that we don't have to wait to the afterlife to find peace and find happiness and find success. We can take claims to this now and do the work now. The image of Jesus as a white man with blue eyes is not historically accurate to who he actually was.
Yup.
That was a choice. That representation is a choice from white folks to recognize Jesus as a white man and connect that to a white God. So Garvey is like, well, if they can do that, then we can do that with a Black Jesus. So when you see Black Jesus today around, and if you ever see a Black Mary, you can attribute that back to Marcus Garvey and his influence with this black pride, black nationalism, and black unity theory. He encouraged parents to give their children dolls that look like them to play with and cuddle. And he did not want black people thinking of themselves in a defeatist way. He says, I am the equal of any white man. I want you to feel the same way. Right? So what Garvey was doing was he was noticing a lot of like diminished visions of self and a lowering acknowledgement and understanding of black people. And he was like, we're not inferior to white people. We can be just as great. Let's just work on ourselves and our system so they can see, which is another thing that Booker T. Washington also said. And this idea of black is beautiful, which is still reflected and stated today from James Brown back then in the 60s. And mind you, this is way before the 60s. Garvey was active in like early 1900s. The UNIA was established in the 1920s. He came to America in, I believe, 1914, 1916, around there. So this is early 1900s, and he has influence up until this day. We have Black Girls Rock. All of these positive black messages and images that we have, it's not only because of Garvey, but Garvey definitely had an influence. His influence went global with this black nationalist movement, and black nationalism itself is still a theory that is discussed and debated within philosophy today in philosophical discussions. Separationism versus integrationism. So that's Marcus Garvey. Thanks for watching another Black Philosopher. I'll see y'all in the next video.